So we have a fairly important subject today. It involves the unknown and all levels of who we are, body, mind, and spirit. It can certainly be a challenge at times, confusing to some, maybe even a little scary to others. But it's something most of us can do with practice and instruction. And hopefully I can help you release any fears or reservations you may have pertaining to the subject of communicating with the other side. Welcome back to Into the Veil. I'm Rachel, and as always, I am grateful to have you with me. For those of you that may be new, I say welcome, welcome. And if you're already a part of our extended family, great to see you again. For those of you that are new, please know that we have an incredible group of like-minded people that I believe are on very similar journeys. And I've found everyone to be incredibly supportive. So if you have comments or questions, feel free to leave them. If you like what you find here, I hope you'll subscribe and give the video a like. And for that, I thank you. So several of you have asked if I might consider doing a video on how to develop intuitive or psychic skills. So here's a beginning to that. There will probably be at least 2 in this series, if not 3. It's a lot of information, and it's not super cut and dry. It can be as individual as we all are. I do want to take a moment for those of you that are in regular classwork with me and say bravo. Bravo to your amazing growth. And I hope you'll pat yourselves on the back for stepping up and meeting yourselves boldly. There is a little bit of courage required in exploring the depths of who we are. Some of these things are comfortable. Most are reasonably casual, but once in a while we hit bumps that we find stretch us. They make us have to expand, and that's not always comfortable. But many of us still think that this is way beyond our abilities to communicate with what we might call the other side, to speak with or feel our loved ones, guides, angels, or even the divine essence of spirit itself as we travel in this 3D journey. You might say, so what is the other side? Most of us understand it to be that other place we journey into when we transition from this physical vessel, crossing into another dimension of existence. When we pass away, we go to that other place. Everyone says, well, what is it? It's like a great mystery. What I can tell you is these dimensional realms that we're speaking of today are very subtle. They're much softer energetically, where everything is connected to the one source, to the all of existence. The realms I'm speaking of are higher realms. They're realms with our helpers, our support, the foundation of who we are. But these are all connected to that one heart, the all of existence. And most of our experiences in this realm are very connected to all of the energetic bodies that we understand, whether that's through the power of thought, feeling, or our spiritual essence itself, all working together in line with the soul's mission. Many names have been given to this over the ages: crossing the veil, tapping into the Akashic records, universal consciousness, the God force, etc. Choose whatever name you're comfortable with. But I know that if you're here, you're fairly well into agreeance that there is something more than just this 3D realm that our bodies inhabit. Most often these realms are dismissed because they function in a very different vibrational plane or patterning. So when we in the 3D are speaking with, say, our loved ones on the other side, we have to learn to become very still, very, very quiet in order to receive the information. And it can be a challenge because it usually means slowing our conscious thoughts way down and not judging from the front of our mind, that logical, analytical part of ourselves that tries to make sense out of everything. By not being cynical, but rather open-minded enough to have our own direct experiences. I believe the reality is that we can all do this, because the truth is that we are all spiritual beings having a current human experience. But within the core of who I am, I believe it is our birthright to access all that we are in our design. It requires learning how to match our energetic vibration to align with the softer and subtler fields that higher spirits and energies inhabit. And as many of us are working on our own processes of ascension, raising our personal vibration and frequency, some of this unfolds naturally, but it can leave us with a number of questions. It feels challenging at times because we may not have a great support group around us that bears understanding for what we are going through. So on occasion, it can leave a sense of isolation or aloneness. And our response to this is often to invalidate ourselves or our experiences and chalk them up to a simple, oh, that was weird. But truly, each experience is an unfoldment of self, much like a bud blossoming, expanding with that sun's light into its full beauty, into its full glory. And really, all in all, it's actually more of a remembering than a learning, a rejoining of what we already know prior to the womb and this human form that we carry now, a reconnecting to that universal part of us that has been around for eternity. So the good news is you can already do this. You just might need to tune in or remember what steps it takes. Little practice, and you'll be stepping through that veil too. You know, in some of my other videos, I've spoken of experiences with traveling out of body, and I personally have many that have crossed over in my life. But they've been great help in this to me. Both of my parents, all of my grandparents, my friends, colleagues. And then, of course, there are always those that perhaps we haven't known in this physical world that are on our journey with us by way of angels, guides, teachers. Some of them are master teachers. So most of this information is not coming from a book. It's coming from a universal group, collective of others. Others that would assist, others that would like to see each of us reach our goals towards spiritual development. Call them people, energies, spirits. Some ways it really doesn't matter, as most, if not all, are all of these things. Many have had their own time in the earth plane and have a great understanding for what we are going through and exactly what we need to help us learn. But do know that all of these experiences are individual, they're personal, and they're designed specifically for us in a way that allows us to connect our dots, to remember, and above all else, to unfold and grow in who we are while we are still on the earth plane. As I've said, it does take a little practice, and usually, beginning, it might seem like there are more seeming failures than successes, but they aren't. So try not to get discouraged if it takes a little time to really hone in on your particular way of receiving information. I can say that I have seen a multitude of latent talents that have emerged once a student was less determined to have it look like something they saw in someone else. Be receptive to trying not to package what it's going to be for you, what it's going to look like. So I'm going to talk a little bit about different forms of intuition so that you can start to get familiar with and think about how you receive your own personal information, or downloads, as I like to call them. And while it may not be something that many of you consider as part of who you are, I will bring up the fact that we have a huge chakra system that run through the entirety of our being in alignment with our spine. And oftentimes we forget this system because we can't see it. We don't have it in the front of our mind to think about. The word chakra is Sanskrit, and it simply means spinning wheel. But these energy centers running through our body, in my personal experience, are great receptors, processors, like massive computer hard drives of sorts. And each of these can signal us by way of feelings or impulses. Now, in this first part, I'm only going to speak of a few key components about this. The second chakra is the one we're paying attention to at the moment. And this has to do with feeling. It resides right between the pelvis and the navel. And many of you get that gut feeling about something. And it's very connected to a true gift known as clairsentience, which literally means clear feeling. Many of you are empathic and will often receive divine intelligence through this center, or the heart chakra, sometimes both, and sometimes in the company of other gifts. But nearly everyone receives their initial impulses through this center. It can be pertaining to those who are alive and well as much as it can be for those that have transitioned. If you are dealing with someone who's crossed over, you may get an overwhelming sense of emotion, feeling like they're right there in the room with you. You could start crying, or you may just feel them that strongly. It's almost like they're just standing right next to you, and you can feel them completely. You may suddenly remember exactly what they felt like, their scent, their voice, and sometimes that will bring up a huge amount of emotion. It's very signature also to grief that we haven't processed, because true deep-rooted emotion is very connected to our past. So they could be also trying to help you release that. The chakras that I find more relative to psychic gifts lie closest to the heavens for us are 5th, 6th, and 7th. The 5th is the throat chakra, and it's also very connected to a gift known as clairaudience. Goes to the ears. It channels to you a clear hearing. So the ability to hear spirit is known as clairaudience. To speak telepathically to them through our minds will sometimes come through or feel like a hearing, but it's a very personal and internal thing. In many ways, it's like a very strong thought. I've noticed that when this is transpiring, the verbiage is often very different to any verbiage I would use. The tone or the way it resonates is totally different than what my normal thoughts sound like. But you can learn to psychically communicate with your loved ones through this facet. Now, initially, you may not feel like you're hearing a response. But if you're having, say, a conversation with this person, this spirit, then it may be when you finally lay down that night, you're just about sound asleep and distinctly and totally hear their voice, just as though they were right next to you. In its own right, it's similar to astral travel, where there is real communication happening across these layers. And it is different than what we would consider a normal dream. But oftentimes, our defenses are such that whether it's a subconscious fear of what you might hear, or a block that says you can't, a lot of times they will respond, but they have to wait until you are in an alter state, when your brain waves are in those alter patterns. But it is the easiest time for them when the veil is more malleable or permeable, and we have much less to distract us. Some spirits prefer one method of communication over another, while others like the challenge of using a few. For those that were close to you, they will use something that is personal to you. My dad, for example, and I had a thing when I was a child. He loved magic, loved to let us think that he was a magician, and one of his favorite tricks was making a coin disappear only for it to reappear. Of course, it was all a game, but what I do know is that he always used a dime. And to this day, when he's near, I will start finding dimes everywhere, until I stop to see what he might want to message, what he might want to communicate with me, or remind me of. Normally, it's a simple message of not forgetting the magic of life, especially if I'm just getting too drugged down or serious, or maybe I've got something that's trying to block my levels of faith. And once I've received the message and I acknowledge, then the dimes stop appearing, and I'll get the sense of his hand on the top of my back. It can occur during daytime hours, but often it will be less frequent, less intense. Remember, though, that this is when we naturally have our energetic barriers in place. We wake up and we shield. We don't even realize that we do it. So our experiences during the daylight hours may be minimalized depending on the strength of the energy that we are working with. Another way we receive information very often is through the sixth chakra, more commonly known as the third eye, the clairvoyant center, clear seeing, and this is why it's called the visual center. In the same way that we receive visuals when we dream at night. These are all connected to the pineal gland through the head. So each one of them is capable of producing different signals for you. They can be, the images can be symbolic. Sometimes, or more often than not, though, they will be very to the point. Now, my guides use many metaphorical visuals or visuals that would symbolize, a stoplight and showing me the color of which light is lit up, green, yellow, red, anything that's familiar to me. And they will find what works for you. Most of all, I've noticed that they like to work with humor. So anything that you can respond to and also delights you will oftentimes be what these close to you will use. Most of these have an extremely funny nature about them. And I think a lot of that is just to get us to realize that it's not all that serious. So again, a lot of people receive information like this when they sleep, maybe daydream. They close their eyes, they relax, and those softer and more subtle energies are allowed to take over, even momentarily. Generally, it does require a little sense of submission or willingness to enable these gifts to begin to develop. And this will often be the hang-up for many, as we do have to let our brain stop trying to figure everything out, to stop trying to be right, and to stop trying to know everything. The act of submission is truly in the willingness to disable the ego aspect of who we are, because it's very difficult for higher information to reside in the lower vibration of ego. Ego has a job to do, but this isn't it. Another key point I would bring up is the word request. If we ask, then these that are there to assist us can do so. I learned this when I was much younger, and I saw that my thoughts were often unguarded, unmonitored, and sabotaging me on so many levels. They were swift, noisy, and out of control by my own perception. But I couldn't quite capture them, to tame them, or control them. And finally, with almost a sense of desperation, I said, hey, if there's anyone near me that can help me learn to control my thoughts, would you please help me quiet my mind, help me gain control over what annihilates all good that's trying to reach me. And sure enough, almost immediately, probably about the time I forgot I'd made the request, I kind of heard, more in thought, but quite clearly, whatever I'd been thinking, cancel that, would you? And at first I wasn't sure what I had even been thinking, or what thought needed to be canceled. But with practice I learned, and I slowly trained my mind and my ego to settle down and obey my frontal thoughts, my conscious thoughts. And sometimes the response would be, are you sure that's the way you really think? Or it might be, are you sure that's the way you really feel? Is that what you really desire to create? And for a little while I thought, oh boy, this is going to be impossible. But it wasn't. And actually wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. But nearly always, these on the other side that I work with will pose a question to me. Because at the end of the day, our power of choice, our free will is absolutely necessary. We have amazing helpers with us, but they need our permission to help. Once it's received, it's incredible. Asking is a required step if you desire to grow. And even after all these years, I sometimes have to remember to ask. It can be very easy and very tempting for any and all of us to take for granted the most basic parts of the process. So time has gotten away from me a little bit, and I think I'm going to stop this video here. Certainly, if you have comments, questions, please do leave them. Ask. If you need to set up sessions, email me. You can find that in the About section for the channel or the video description box. If you're considering classwork, again, reach out to me. Absolutely willing to help if I can. Anything that you need, I will do what I can to provide. There's more to come. I have some personal experiences I'm glad to share with you to show you some of the uniquity in these energies and how they present themselves. I appreciate you being here. I hope this gets you started. We'll go into the next steps in the next video, and I'll try to post it as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, I hope you'll stay blessed. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.